Hey guys, welcome to Kiki Cardio. So this video is mainly about atrial septal defects. So make sure you take a pen and paper and write or draw whatever I say immediately, okay? So this is how I'm going to represent the human heart in the whole video. I call it the box diagram, okay? So this is the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, the left ventricle. So in an atrial septal defect, there is technically a gap over here that is in between the left and the right atrium, and because the pressure in the left atrium is higher than the right atrium, it's a lot of pressure is there, which is why the blood is going to go from the left side to the right side. So this golden color arrow mark, it shows the direction of blood flow from the right side to the left side. So we'll see how exactly the blood flows in the atrial septal defect and what are the problems associated with it. So basically, in an atrial septal defect, so this is the box diagram of the heart, and we know the four chambers: the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle, right? And there is a gap over here, and it's the atrial septal defect. So what happens is that the direction of the blood flow will be denoted by green from now on. So because the pressure in the left side is higher than the right side, it's called a left to right shunt, okay? You would not have understood it when you have read it in the book, but this is what left to right shunt means. And what happens is that after this shunt is over, the volume of the blood present in the right ventricle is very high. I mean, right ventricle is already receiving blood from the SVC and also the IVC. So it's technically receiving like two bloods, the blood from here too. And that is what causes the increased blood volume. So this increased blood volume is very important because you know why? Because this is going to cause, okay, so this increased volume is going to cause the right atrium to increase in size. That is, it undergoes dilatation and hypertrophy is what occurs here. Alright, and sometime later this blood eventually has to leave that part and it has to go down, right? So when it goes down from this atrium to the right ventricle, it is going to take a lot of time because more blood means more time, right? More blood is more time, and more time, so the closure of the AV valve over here is going to take more time to close, right? Which means S1 is delayed. S1 is delayed over here. We'll see all these findings separately as well at the end of the video, but for now just concentrate on all the concepts, okay? So S1 is delayed, which is the closure of the AV valves, the right side. But because less amount of blood is going here, the S1 is not so delayed, but it's feeble, so we won't be able to hear it at all. So the only prominent one is S1, and that is delayed because of the tricuspid component, because it's the right side, okay? Because of the tricuspid component, it is delayed. And after that, there's increased blood flow. It has to go here. So let's take another diagram. So okay, so in this picture we'll see how it happens exactly. So initially we saw that there was this diagram where blood from the right atrium enters the left atrium, and now it has crossed and have reached here, right? So now because more blood is going to reach here, okay, more blood is going to reach in the right ventricle, the right ventricles will undergo increase in size, so hypertrophy, okay? Well, a point to be noted is that the right ventricle of the heart is going to be right behind the sternum, isn't it? So whenever the right side ventricle is increasing in size, there will be something called a parasternal heave, okay? There's a parasternal heave. So after this parasternal heave, we will be able to note that difference in the chest of the child which is affected, especially so congenital heart disease is the child which is affected, and that's what happens next, okay? And after that, now the blood is in the right ventricle, isn't it? So because the blood is in the right ventricle, now it has to enter into the pulmonary trunk, right? So the blood is over here. Now it has to enter into the pulmonary trunk. So when it enters into the pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary blood flow is high. So there's more volume, and so it's going to take more time more time, and it's going to produce a lot of noise. Okay, so just remember, I remember it this way. So there's the door. Well, you have to knock the door, but if there are like one person, he just says one hello. But if there are like too many, like a lot of people, they say a lot of hellos, which means it's going to cause a lot of noise, right? Which is why more blood is going to cause more noise. Well, this more noise will be manifested by a prominent sound in the heart. So there's a loud P2 because closure of the AV valve is going to cause S1, and closure of the valve, the pulmonary and the aortic valves, cause S2, isn't it? So S1 is due to this, closure of this, and S2 is due to closure of this. So as a result of which, what happens is that because there's a loud P2 component, the P2 is going to be a bit loud, right? Isn't it? But however, the blood going through here, it's going to be very little. So there's less volume going through the left ventricle, and so the aortic valve doesn't close very loudly, but still it is carrying a lot of blood. So there will be some noise here too, but it's a bit feeble, but it's still heard, right? Over here we don't hear that much, but here we will still hear it. So technically what happens is that more time is taken by more volume. So whenever the pulmonary valve is going to close, it's going to take a lot of time, so it's increased, right? So it's going to be delayed. But on the other hand, okay, yeah, we know it's because of more volume, right? But because A2, the aortic valve, is going to take very less time. You know why? Because there's less volume. So it's a bit soon, right? It's not delayed, it's soon. So what happens is that the S2, which was composed of P2 and A2, is now undergoing a split because this is late and this is early because this has more blood and this has less blood. So technically it causes a split in the S2. It's called an S2 split. It's actually called a wide S2 split because it's very prominent, right? Okay, so now we have crossed that part, and now our blood is in the pulmonary trunk, which is important. And so from the pulmonary trunk, we draw the lung like this. So the pulmonary trunk is over here. So the pulmonary trunk is going to give the blood to their lungs, and we already know that there is a lot of blood, like a lot of blood. The volume of the blood is very high. And as a result of which, the lung is going to be overloaded, right? So on a chest x-ray, the lung shows a plethoric appearance. It's called a plethora because increased blood in the pulmonary circulation. That is plethoric circulation, all right? So it's a plethora of the lung field. Well, because there's a lot of blood in here, it's going to cause increase in volume, isn't it? Increase in volume means stasis. Stasis means very high chance of getting infection. So there's a very good chance the person gets an infection. So the child is going to get repeated recurrent respiratory tract infections, all right? And then from here, once again, the blood is obviously going back over here. And because we already know there's an atrial septal defect, the blood is going to go back over here. And so at no point of time, this will not increase in size at all. It will not increase in size because it is the right atrium which is getting all the blood. The right atrium is going to increase in size. We call it the right atrial hypertrophy, all right? Right atrium undergoes hypertrophy. But apart from that, one more thing we have to know. So whenever there is a passage between two chambers or between a chamber and like a blood vessel, there will be some noise. But here, since there is no big pressure difference in the pressure, okay, no big difference in the pressure, there's no shunt memo. Usually we expect a shunt memo, but there's no shunt memo here. So while the blood goes from this side to this side, that is from the left atrium to the right atrium, it's not going to produce any sound. Why? Because the pressure difference is negligible, all right? So that's what we do. That's about the ASD. So if you want me to summarize, I could summarize it right away. So from the beginning, the blood goes this way. So there's an atrial septal defect. It's a quick recap, all right? So the atrial septal defect, the blood is going to go from here to here. And while going here, there's no shunt memo. There's no shunt memo. There is a shunt, but there's no murmur. It's very quiet. And because there's more volume over here, because the blood comes from here and here, this SVC and the IVC, there's more volume. Volume overload causes right atrium, which undergoes dilatation and hypertrophy. And after that, the blood is going to go here. And because more volume goes here, more volume, blood crosses the atrioventricular valve. So there's going to be a delayed and a loud S1, alright? Delayed and a loud S1. And because the volume which is got here is very high, so there is a right ventricular hypertrophy as well. Alright, it's a right ventricular hypertrophy as well. Right ventricles undergo hypertrophy as well. And after that, the most important thing is that the pulmonary artery will undergo hypertrophy as well. Pulmonary artery undergoes hypertrophy because it's getting a lot of blood, and while going, this is going to produce a lot of sound. This is going to produce a bit lesser sound but still prominent. So there's a split in S2, which is the closure of the semilunar valves, such as the aortic valve and the pulmonary valves. So that's going to be there, and then it goes to the lungs. And if it goes to the lungs, we'll see there is increased plethora in the chest X-ray. And once again, the blood goes here, and so however from left atrium goes to the right atrium, and the cycle continues. All right, so this is what happens usually. Okay guys, so time for a quick recap. It's not an actual recap. So we learned 5 more points about each and every one of them. So first, what is the specialty of ASD? ASD typically occurs in females more than males, because a female child is more often affected than a male child. And we know what sort of hypertrophy occurs, the heart sounds and the heart murmurs. Well, so we also need to know the axis deviation. Because there is a right heart hypertrophy, there will be right heart hypertrophy leads to a right axis deviation. Well, so axis deviation is kind of an ECG finding, alright, which is going to cause a lot of trouble in the future. So whenever there is a hypertrophy of whatever ventricles, that side the axis is going to get deviated. That's the only point I would like you to take from this slide. Next, we'll also see some X-ray findings. I want you to comment down below, because we have already discussed this. And there are certain syndromes which are associated with ASD. The syndromes include Holt-Oram syndrome, Down syndrome, and so on. But if you want some more, I can say Ehlers-Danlos syndrome too. These are very important, and Down syndrome is going to cause ostium primum defect, which is predominantly an endocardial cushion defect. So an endocardial cushion defect is what occurs in Down syndrome. Alright. So about the complications which occur, this is the last point. So about the complications which occur include those occurring only in the 4th decade of life. So only if the person's like very well aged, the complications start occurring. So complications include stroke, pulmonary hypertension, and last but not the least, Eisenmenger syndrome. Eisenmenger syndrome usually occurs in these kind of congenital heart diseases, but more so with acyanotic ones. And that is it. Thank you.